The Indians also came to Maharaji with varying degrees of desire and readiness, but for them it was different. They had grown up in a culture in which holy beings abounded, and the parents of most of them had gurus. For the family, the guru was a combination of grandfather, worldly and spiritual guide, and reflection or manifestation of God. They often treated Maharaji more as a man and less as a god, and yet at the same time they could surrender more easily to him. For them, surrender was not a personal matter of ego as it was for us. In the group of stories about initial meetings described by some of Maharaji's closest Indian devotees, both the difference of culture and the similarity of opening and love are apparent. I have known Maharaji since I came into this world. My father and mother were both devotees. My father since 1940 and my mother since 1947. Because our parents were devotees and because he was always being discussed in our family, we were all born devotees of him. I first met Maharaji in Bhowali many years ago. Maharaji frequently visited a certain ma's home there. I told her that I had heard about him but had never met him, and I asked her to tell me the next time he came. After a week or so, Maharaji came at night. In the morning, a message came for me and I went at once. I found him lying on a cot. He looked at me, then closed his eyes for a moment. He knew at once who I was, who I had been before, and what I was going to do in this world. In a few seconds, he said, "I am very pleased to see you," which he repeated many times. Maharaji had walked from Nainital to Bhowali during the night. He said, "You have brought me here. I shall see you again in Haldwani." Then Maharaji boarded a bus for Almora. In those days, he travelled mostly by bus, not by car. People warned me not to take him seriously. Neem Karoli is a big liar. He very seldom tells the truth. You can't depend on him. In any case, I went to Haldwani. After a few days, someone came to my room and told me that Maharaji had come to Haldwani and gave me his address. I saw him then and have been with him ever since. I first met Maharaji in 1950 when I rode with my boss and Maharaji from Nainital to Haldwani. My boss, a government minister, was already a devotee of Maharaji and had offered him this lift, but I was smoking and acting as if Maharaji was just another person. In 1958, after the death of my mother, I was in Bhowali with my father on vacation. We spent a night in the government rest house there and my father became ill in the night, in much pain. They called the Bhowali doctor who gave him an injection, but to no avail. The next day, doctors from Nainital came and said that he needed an emergency gallbladder operation. That same day, I went to consult doctors at the nearby TB sanatorium. Preparations were then underway for a puja, ritual of prayer to celebrate the opening of a small Hanuman temple built by the doctor there who was a devotee of Maharaji. I stayed on to watch. Maharaji arrived but stayed hidden. I grew curious to meet him. I heard that Maharaji had put someone in a trance, so I watched a while from a distance before leaving. That evening, a messenger from the Nainital bus station came to me and told me to visit a certain Baba Neem Karoli. Since there are so many Babas, I dismissed the message. But at night I went to the bus station and inquired as to who had sent this message, but no one knew. This aroused my curiosity even more. I asked where I could find this Baba, Neem Karoli, and went there. Maharaji said to me, Your name is so and your father is very ill. Yes, you thought he might die, but God has cured him. Doctor have told you that he should be operated on, but he shouldn't be. He'll be all right. Maharaji gave me 2 or 3 mangoes for my father, which I fed to him, and he began to improve. After a few days, Maharaji again called me. I went but didn't touch his feet. I was planning to return to Delhi, and Maharaji said, "You are going to Delhi. You drive too fast. Take your father carefully and he'll be all right." This touched my heart, and I touched Maharaji's feet. My father never had the operation and became very healthy with no relapse. Since I wasn't married, I was living with my brother and his wife. When Maharaji came to them, I went into the farthest room so I wouldn't have to be involved with such people, for I thought sadhus, renunciates are no good. After some time, Maharaji came into the room where I was. He walked in, sat down and said, "Sadhus are no good." After that, I just became a devotee. One of Maharaji's closest devotees for the last 20 years gives the following account. In 1935, I was on vacation from school and went to Dakshineshwar on a religious pilgrimage. When I reached the place where there were many Shiva's temples, a man appeared before me, whom I had not noticed to be there before. "My son," the man said, "you are a Brahmin. I shall give you a month." "I will not take it," I said. "I do not believe in it." "You must take it," he insisted, and so I relented. Thereafter, I faithfully recited the mantra daily. Many years passed. It was June 1955. I had some close friends who were like members of the family. Every Sunday we'd chat in the evening at our house. Around 9 p.m., I saw my wife, aunt and mother going out. I asked them where they were going, and they said just to an adjacent house that some Baba was visiting. One of the fellows with me said cynically, "Does he eat? I can arrange food for him." This fellow was a hunter. My wife said, "You should not say things like that." In 10 minutes they returned. They reported that he had been sitting in a dirt hut with an oil lamp and had told them to go. When they didn't go, he said, "Go, your husband's Bengali friends have come. Go and serve them tea. I shall come in the morning." In the morning, my wife and I went over together. Maharaji was on a small cot in a tiny room. As we entered, he sprang up and took my hand, saying, "Let's go." We left so fast that my wife had to remove her sandals to keep up. He took us to our own house and said, "I shall stay with you." When the woman from the other house came to take him back, he would not go. Later he questioned me. "You are a devotee of Shiva?" "Yes." "You already have a mantra." It was at that moment that I realized it had been Maharaji who had given me the mantra 20 years before. My first meeting with him in Kanpur was short and sweet, perhaps only 20 minutes. I pranamed to him. He asked me who I was and gave me his blessing and left abruptly. Where he went, nobody could say. I met him again 10 months or a year later in Lucknow. One by one, he sent the many people who were sitting with him away until only we 3 were left. Then he asked my sister-in-law, "What do you want?" She said she'd come only to pay her respects. Then he asked me, and I replied, "I only need your blessings, nothing more." Then he said to my wife, "You have come with positive questions. Why don't you ask them?" In fact, she had come with some question which she hadn't even confided in us. But she had made a decision beforehand not to ask the question herself. She wanted Maharaji to answer them unasked, and she wanted it done in private. So she didn't speak. She couldn't answer that she didn't have question, but because of her decision, she couldn't ask them. So Maharaji said to her, "You want me to answer your question without your asking, and you want me to tell when you are alone. You are putting a sadhu to a very hard test. Tomorrow I will come to your house in Kanpur and answer your question. We sat there a few minutes more and then he said, go. As we were leaving, a doubt came to my mind that Maharaji had just sidetracked us by saying he'd visited us tomorrow and answer the question. At about 10 o'clock that evening, a message came to our house for a Maharaji devotee who was visiting us. The message was the Babaji's familiar form of Baba was coming to the devotee's house and he should return home right away. We accompanied him. As soon as I pranammed to Maharaji, he said, you doubted my integrity, never doubt a sadhu. The burden is on him, not on you. You have not to doubt. I apologized to him. I had indeed doubted. Then he said, all right, tomorrow I'll come to your place. So the next morning he came over. At this time, his first visit, I really didn't knew what to do. Others told me that nothing is to be done. Just provide a big pillow on a bed for him to lean on and offer some food or fruit or milk. He'll take whatever he feels like. It's his sweet will. When he arrived, I escorted him to the sitting room. He said, no, I won't sit there. Let the others sit there. You take me to the small room. I was surprised and confused, since I did not know which small room he was referring to. He gave a description of the room and walked through the house as if he knew where the room was. I was following him, not leading him in our house. He went straight to the room and said, here I want to sit. He said, call Ma, my wife. She came and he then answered all the questions she had in her mind. Is there any question to which I haven't replied? He asked. She had to say that there were no more. An ICS, Indian Civil Service Commissioner of Lucknow, used to drink ferociously. The superintendent of police said to Maharaji that they should go visit him. Maharaji agreed, and when they arrived, the commissioner had a bottle hidden behind him. Maharaji yelled from the car, what's the matter? The commissioner was furious. He screamed at the superintendent, who have you brought here? He has no manners. Get him out of here. The superintendent opened his holster and was about to shoot the commissioner for talking to Maharaji that way. But Maharaji blew up. What are you doing? He is a great saint. You see only his outside. I'll never come with you again. The commissioner later became a great devotee. He would come for darshan but sit outside by the shoes, for he felt that was his place. He eventually became head of the administrative officer school in Allahabad. He suffered from thrombosis. At the end he suffered great agony but kept Rama mantra, repetition of Ram, a name of God, going and was very gay. The superintendent was in tears when he visited him near the end, and he asked, should I call your wife and son? The commissioner said, no, this is not a time of attachment. At this time, all I have to do is remember Ram and Maharaji. Goodbye, we'll meet again. And he died. I had wanted to meet Maharaji for a long time, but could never catch him. Finally, a friend came and took me in his company car to where Maharaji was supposed to be. There were 4 rooms and Maharaji was in the far room. I went in. The minute I entered, Maharaji said, get out, you. So I went out and sat down, but didn't leave. I sat for many hours. Finally, my friend had to return the car because it was closing time. Although my house was quite distant, I was determined to stay and have Maharaji's full darshan. Finally, someone took pity and said, you aren't doing it right. When some people start to go in, you go in with them, and if he throws you out, wait and try again with the next people. I did so and was twice thrown out. Finally, the 3rd time, Maharaji said, come sit here. What is your name and what do you do? Then he said, okay, now go. But I said, I am not going. I haven't had darshan yet. I haven't had a chance to discuss my problems with you. Maharaji said, go now and come at 6 a.m. So I went home, but I couldn't sleep. And at 2 a.m. I got up and did puja. I was afraid Maharaji would leave before I got there. When I arrived at the house at 6 a.m., Maharaji had already left, but they said he would return. After some time, he did come back, and then Maharaji and I spent many hours together. In fact, the rest of my life has been spent with Maharaji. Darshan, a meeting of the spirit. Not everyone who met Maharaji was opened or awakened at the initial visit. Many came, enjoyed a pleasant visit, and left apparently unaffected. They seemed to have no business with Maharaji. That is, they were either unready to be touched so deeply, or the vehicle of the Guru or this particular Guru was not their way. Balaram, to a new arrival on the veranda at Vrindavan, have you had Maharaji's darshan yet? I don't know. Is he the fat one sitting over there? Then there were those who, while experiencing no dramatic jap, yet responded to some subtle thread that drew them back to Maharaji again and again. I was astonished to watch the way in which tough people would melt as they stayed around Maharaji. For many of us who were either dramatically opened initially or subtly drawn, the desire that became uppermost in our lives was to be with Maharaji. We had become devotees, for when we were with him, we were experiencing being at home in the heart of God. Little wonder that his presence became so addictive, and that we would leave home and go to any length to be with this spiritual piper who was teaching us to dance and play in the fields of the Lord. But to assume that just because you wished to be with Maharaji, you could be, did not take into account the nature of this man's behavior. He moved about unpredictably, and whenever he stayed in any one place for even a few days, people would arrive in a continuous stream from morning till night. Some came barefoot with naked babies from nearby farms. Others came by jet and taxi. I was standing in the front yard of a humble house in a little village in the hills when Maharaji arrived unexpectedly. I was told to remain outside, so I had the opportunity to watch the people come. They seemed to appear almost out of nowhere, arriving from all directions. They were running, some of the women wiping the floor from their hands on their aprons, others carrying their babies half-dressed. The men had left their shops unattended. Some were pulling flowers from the trees as they came to have something to offer, but they came with an expectancy, with a joy, with a reverence they could not be mistaken. True, many wanted something worldly from the miracle Baba, but beyond that they wanted once again to taste of the nectar of being with him. Many of us vacillated in our reactions to this constant demand upon Maharaji. At one moment, we saw ourselves and the others devotees and seekers as so many vultures around a piece of raw meat, or like flies crawling over a piece of sugar. At those times, we tried to protect him, and often we held back so as not to contribute to the scene. But at other times, we would realize how totally Maharaji had control of the situation. When he felt that people were, as he put in, eating his hand, he would simply go into a back room and close the door, or send everyone away, or get in a car and leave without a backward glance. Once, after travelling many months to see Maharaji, we at last found him at a devotee's home in Delhi. We were allowed into the back room with him for a few minutes, and then were sent out to have tea with many others. About 15 minutes later, Maharaji walked out of the inner room and right by us, not more than 2 feet from our faces, with not the least turn of the head or signal of recognition. He went to a car in which a driver was waiting. He got in, and the car left for a destination unknown. Such a person was clearly not at our mercy. So Maharaji kept continually on the move in a totally unpredictable fashion. Within a temple compound, he would move from place to place at one moment freely available, while at the next closeted in some room with the door securely bolted. Were that his only movement, devotees could settle in near the temple and just visit each day and wait for the moments when he would appear. But his movements was not limited to a single compound. Rather, he wandered from village to village, from the mountains to the plains, from the one end of the India to the other, from temples to private homes to jungle ashram. In the middle of the night, he might leave unannounced for a destination unknown, or he might board a train and supposedly be destined for a certain city, not only to leave the train at some other station, sometimes so quickly, even as the train was moving, the devotees who had followed him were left behind. The intense desire of the devotees to be with Maharaji, combined with his elusive and unpredictable behavior, gave rise to the most intricate dramas of hide and seek, labeled by one waggish devotee as the Great Grace Race. Being a devotee of Maharaji was like participating in a continuous and unending treasure hunt, limited only by economic resources or family responsibility. The pot of gold was, of course, darshan with Maharaji, and gold it was. One Indian devotee put it succinctly when he said, "Even sexual intercourse with my wife cannot equal darshan with Maharaji."